NC State family, it's time for an honest look at your sports world. Let's get you hooked up for Pack Therapy, presented by First Horizon Bank. Here are your hosts, Tim Donnelly and Wolfpack football legend Mike Glennon.
Welcome into another edition of Pack Therapy. Tim Donnelly here alongside former NC State quarterback Mike Glennon. Mike, actually, former NC State legend, which is, by the way, becoming a thing in the questions, which is a good transition here. My co-host is Mike Glennon. If you have a question for him, go ahead and comment in our YouTube page underneath this video. Whatever question you have for him, but also feel free to come back, as many of you do, on game day when the game is going on or next week to ask questions about the upcoming Wake Forest game and the reaction to it and all those things. But people have started saying, like, a question for the legendary Mike Glennon, because that's always how I introduce you. So, question for the legendary Mike Glennon, leave them in the comment page. We'll start off 24-17 win over Northern Illinois. Dave Doran was adamant in the post-game press conference, you do not get mad at wins. I think there's a little room for anger. You can be happy for the win and mad about some of the other things. What happened with the offense from your perspective where, sure you won, sure you didn't turn the ball over, which is good, but you gained 171 yards total?
Yeah, definitely. It's like, who is this team? Last week we were complaining about the defense against Clemson. Now the offense versus Northern Illinois. I left the stadium the other day, thinking offense didn't play well. CJ Bailey, is he going to be the guy going forward if Grayson McCall gets healthy? It was definitely a step back for the offense. And KC, Concepcion, 4 catches for 4 yards. It's like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. I watched the film, and it sounds like coach speak. Northern Illinois actually has a pretty good defense. And they did what we kind of talked about. What would Clemson do? Would they heat him up? Would they mix up the coverage, or would they just play vanilla? And Northern Illinois mixed up the coverage. They try to confuse CJ Bailey. They would show one coverage, they would show one blitz, and then they would do something else. And he looked like a true freshman. So, I think this offense has a lot of room to grow. How do they get KC the ball? I think that's the receivers in general. Noah Rogers looked good. He caught the long kind of naked bootleg on the first possession and then just disappeared. On the defensive side of the ball, we did see a team that looked like the coaches – lit a fire under them in practice all week. Because
the Last Dance meme, they took it personal. Like,
yes.
they showed up ready
They played
to play
hard.
Yep.
And to Dave's kind of defense of don't complain about a win, NC State got the lead and started playing a little conservatively. But at the end of the day, with the way the CJ was playing, I don't blame him for trying to play conservative. And you look at Northern Illinois, you could argue they lost the game more than NC State won it. I mean, you have it was an interception or fumble return for a touchdown, and then a fumble return to the 1 yard line. That was the difference in the game. Those two plays won NC State the game, or from Northern Illinois side, that's what lost it for them.
You're completely right on all of that. Very much the feeling you had is the feeling I had, which is after that game, I was going, all right, the future of this offense is significantly different than after the Clemson game. And I did think this might happen, and we've talked about it. Once C.J. Bailey settles in, sometimes that's when the weight of the world kind of settles in on your shoulders. He went from thrown into a game, then I'm sure that it wasn't the treadmill slowing down. The treadmill sped up on him because you're going to Clemson. This was the first week he got to take a breath and maybe understand what was happening. And okay, I'm the starting quarterback as a true freshman, at a school like NC State, and I'm going to be playing at home in front of all of these fans, and there's now expectations on me, and I did play pretty well at Clemson, even if the team didn't. It looked tight this week, and then based on what Coach Doran was saying after the game, a lot of like, well, when you have a freshman quarterback, you can't blah, blah, blah. When we have a freshman quarterback, you don't open up the full playbook. When we have a freshman quarterback, I'm going, all right, that sounds a lot like whenever Grayson McCall is cleared, he's back in, just so they can get off of that traditional thinking of we have a freshman quarterback, so we can't do what we want to do.
I think that the other, from the Northern Illinois side is they also had a week, really a game and a half to game plan off of CJ Bailey. Clemson probably didn't really know what to expect with him, where Northern Illinois got the chance to kind of study that Clemson tape and figure out how they want to go attack them. And I expect more of it. I expect Wake Forest to kind of do the same thing, is mix up the coverage, give a variety of looks pre-snap, and then at the snap of the ball, rotate to some other coverage. And as a young guy, that can be overwhelming. And I think that's where the NC State coaches need to step in. And for me, I think they need to get him out of the pocket a little bit more. That he seems like he does a good job throwing on the run, and that kind of takes some of the thinking out of it. It doesn't really matter what covers they're playing when you're doing some rollouts. It's really just find the open guy, go 1 to 2 to 3. If he's open to it, throw it. And I think we'll see kind of more just kind of pure progression reads where he's not having to decipher what kind of covers that are in, and just let him see if a guy's open, throw it. If not, move on to your next read in the progression.
And the questions that I've selected for the second half of this episode, where we go to the YouTube comments, a lot of offensive game plan stuff going on. So I'm going to save some of that, because the next, I always like to dictate, or try to, as a play caller, dictate what the defense can do. Run the ball, then they have to put extra guys in the box, limits the disguises and all of that. So we'll get to that later. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is Casey Concepcion. Ironically, I have in my notes 4 catches for 5 yards. So you shorted him 20% of his total when you said 4 for 4. He did have the touchdown, though. That is something that, for lack of a better, it's got to be better. He is the guy that the defense is going to focus in on, but you can't just concede to, all right, we're not going to get him the ball. He's good enough that you have to find the way, and that's kind of the play caller's job, is to scheme open your best playmakers and get them the ball in space. Yeah,
I mean, you look at the last 3 games, going back to Louisiana Tech, 8 catches for 25 yards, averaging 3 yards a catch. Clemson, 5 for 40, 8 yards a catch. And then Northern Illinois 4 for 5, 1.3. I mean, there's
a fumble mixed in there. Yeah. There's not many touchdown opportunities, although he did catch a few of them. There's like Casey Concepcion, his role is just drastically different than what it was even at the beginning of the year.
And I think some of that does fall on playing a true freshman quarterback, that maybe you're not able to do the things down the field as much, but they were already kind of utilizing him this way before it was CJ Bailey. So I don't have a good answer of what's going on. It seems like there's a problem and this needs to be fixed. And we got to find a way to push the ball down the field more and allow him to do what he does best. Because, 4 catches for 5 yards against Northern Illinois is just unacceptable.
And I'm going to push back on it a little bit. I actually – and I don't have the stats in front of me to prove this, but having watched a ton of football and played a decent amount, I actually think new quarterbacks tend to lean on like their number one. I remember when I first became, any kind of contributor at the college level, I was, I had my guy. Everybody's got their number one. I was way more comfortable pushing it downfield to him than I was anybody else, because I had confidence that he would make a play for me. And if it's a 50-50 ball, he might be the only one I would trust early in my career. If I'm CJ Bailey, Casey Concepcion has to be a guy that, if I'm going to take a chance, I think it's going to be the Casey Concepcion.
I agree with what you're saying. That for me, it was like my rookie year in Tampa. I had Vincent Jackson. It was like, without a doubt, if I had one-on-one, I was going to Vincent because I trusted him. But where Vincent is different than Casey is he's a big body. So it was more like one-on-one, trust him, where Casey's more playing in the slot. And in the slot, you're throwing over the middle a little bit more, and there's just more bodies around there. So if he was that big body kind of guy, like, in years past, more like what Emeka Emezi probably was for NC State a few years ago, I would say that. It's just, I think right now CJ's head's kind of spinning on things over in the middle of the field where there's bodies moving everywhere.
I'm just going to tell a quick personal story, because it's one my dad tells all the time about Mike and Vincent Jackson. We have a family fantasy league. For those of you just tuning in, maybe the first episode, Mike and I are cousins. So my dad is Mike's uncle. And there was it might have been your rookie year. My dad had you on his fantasy team, and they were super jacked up, and you were playing well, and you were throwing all these multi-touchdown games, and he was playing against you. So he texted you like, hey, have a big game. Like, I need it for my fantasy, to you to play in the NFL for his fantasy team. And your response was, you have me, but I have Vincent Jackson, and I decide where the ball goes, which is obviously a joke. But the way the story ends is Vincent Jackson had 2 touchdowns and 130 yards, and he outperformed you, and it's. But that to me shows what I'm trying to say, which is young quarterbacks go to their number one. You're right. I mean, Vincent Jackson on a jump ball is a little different than Casey Concepcion on a jump ball, but I still think you hang on that read a little bit longer. You give KC maybe more time to uncover on his route over the middle or whatever it is than you might give a younger player or someone else.
I think it more just falls on the coaches, because asking a true freshman to key on a guy.
Mm-hmm. True.
It should be they need to scheme him up, KC, better. They have way more experience in college football than CJ does. So I think it falls on the coaching staff. Let's find a way to push the ball down the field and get Casey the ball.
Let's talk defense. The 4 turnovers is great. You mentioned how they set up the offense, which is the best thing in the world. I don't know when this became a thing, but the words complementary football. I never said it in my career, and now every coach wants to talk about it all the time, and I'm going that's just playing well on both sides. But that's about as complementary football as you can get when you force a turnover and give it to the offense on the 1 yard line, or when you score on your own. The complementary football from defense to offense, really, as you mentioned, was the difference in the game. And I guess the question is what was the difference? The bad games for defense have looked really, really bad, but then they looked really good against Northern Illinois.
I think it was effort.
Yeah.
It was just they played way harder. What we've been talking about getting blown off the ball, defensive line up into the linebackers. This was the first game all year where I saw our defensive line pushing the offensive line back, and it had such an impact on the game. They weren't able to run the ball all that well, and then the sack fumbles were the difference maker. I mean, we talk about it all the time. The turnover ratio, you win the turnover ratio. It was 4-0.
4-0. Yep.
4-0. I mean, that's like a 99% chance to win. And then you tag on a fumble return for a touchdown and essentially another one. I mean, you are looking at a 99.9% according to analytics, I'm sure. And that's why I think you do play more conservative on offense when the defense is playing the way it did.
I'm sure this will sound like two quarterbacks sitting in a room downplaying defense. I don't want to do that because defense is wildly difficult, and the mental side of reactions and everything on the defensive side is really, really complicated in a lot of ways, especially up front. I think it's sometimes see ball, get ball, lane or gap responsibilities and all of that. But it does oftentimes come down to just, can you beat the guy in front of you? And maybe this is, a place where State had the advantage on Northern Illinois. Admittedly, I don't watch a ton of Northern Illinois, but they were winning their individual matchups. They were shedding blocks, and that just changes everything. It frees up the next level, gives less time to the quarterback, and it makes it more difficult. The way I always describe that is when this was early in my career, the defense used to have a little chant where one of them, like the captain or whatever, would yell "time to eat," and everyone else would yell "time to kill." And time to eat, time to kill. And I remember going I don't know, it seems like it should be more complicated than that, fellas. But then, they went out and they were a really good defense. So State's defense to me just kind of had that time to eat, time to kill mentality where you're not playing reckless, but this guy in front of me is going to get his tail whipped today. And then they went out and did it.
Yeah, I think when coach starts threatening you with playing time, that's gonna get everyone's attention. And I think they saw the tape, and I'm sure guys were called out and embarrassed, and they don't want to put that on tape again, not only for the team, but for their future aspirations to play professionally and all that. So I think whatever Doran and Gibson and the position coaches said in their meetings, it clearly worked, because it looked like a completely different team as far as the effort. We talked about last week, hard, tough together. That looked like a team that was playing hard, tough together.
Wake Forest this week, because as soon as you have a week like that, it becomes, can you play with that same bite, that same intensity when you didn't just give up 59 points and on national television and kind of need that wake-up call. Wake Forest can score. They've lost some shootouts, but Hank Bachmeier, since he's taken over, the transfer from spent time at Boise State, they can score. How does the defense build off of that?
I think, you find a way from the coaches to
Is it like you have to insult them? You have to put
positive reinforcement,
like,
but at the same time, like
bulletin board material.
We're not
like
going
this.
back to what we were. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea to remind them a little bit. Hey, jobs are still on the line here. You play the way you did. Your job is safe. But if we revert back to the way Clemson is, I don't have a problem mixing up the lineup again. So you take the good and you want to build on it, but you still remind them that this isn't set in stone yet. We need to prove it more than 1 week that we can do this again.
I have some stats on the Wake Forest defense here that might be an opportunity, especially if CJ Bailey is the quarterback, to open it up for him a little bit. Most yards per game allowed in the ACC. Wake Forest with over 400, and this is per game, over 470, which is about 70 yards more than any other team in the entire conference. Second most passing yards allowed per game in the ACC, just 2 yards behind Stanford 288, and Wake Forest 286. Most rushing yards allowed per game in the ACC, 184. And this is a matchup of the two teams that have allowed the most points per game in the ACC thus far, with NC State giving up the most, 33.6, and Wake Forest giving up the second most, 31.3 points per game. If you're the offense and you hear those stats, I have to think, all right, against some of these other teams, we may have protected our young quarterback. Against Wake, if we're not gashing this defense, we're not doing our job, so we have to take some bigger chances.
Yeah, I think those numbers say to me that our concerns with the receivers and all that, they need to have a big game this week. There's kind of no excuse not to. CJ Bailey can throw the ball well enough. They have the skill set. Now let's put it, show it on Saturday. So Wake Forest obviously struggling defense, and the way that our offense has been putting up points, there might be a chance that this becomes a little bit of a shootout. So I think CJ Bailey and crew will have a big game, and they probably are going to have to.
We're going to take a break here. When we come back, we have a bunch of questions. I think it's fairly obvious that the offensive game plan is where fans have the most questions, and where the state Wolfpack Nation is most concerned. So we'll dive into some of your questions from that with Mike coming up next right here on Pack Therapy. Back on Pack Therapy, Tim Donnelly, Mike Glennon, and we are entering into the portion of the show where you get to drive a little bit. Again, head to our YouTube page, 99.9 The Fan, find the Pack Therapy podcast. It's right there in the playlists, and if you leave questions on the most recent videos, we will do our best to answer them all, or at least the ones we consider good. I tried to find ones that asked different things because there was a drastic amount of game plan questions, but there was also this other kind of interesting sociology, I guess might be the word, side of things that I'll hit on first. And I'm going to rephrase this because a couple people were talking about it, and some of them not the nicest. Have you ever had a situation where a player's body language was something that you had to address as a leader? Most of this stemming from Casey Concepcion scoring a touchdown and showing extremely little emotion, which then you start looking at context clues, not having a big game, not getting a lot of catches, the past 2 or 3 games not really being highlight games for Concepcion. Granted, it was a 1-yard touchdown on a kind of a boring little arrow route, but it's a touchdown, and rallying the squad, it didn't really look like it.
Yeah, I think I noticed it. I saw that he scored the touchdown, and it did not feel like the first game of the season when he had 3 touchdowns against Western Carolina. The celebration was a much different feeling. And, I don't blame him for being upset. If you're a competitor, you want to play at a high level and help the team. And right now, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily his fault, but it's not.
It's not happening. And that any athlete, when baseball player in a slump, right? You don't want to talk to that guy in the clubhouse. Like that's a legitimate change if you're a competitive person to your personality.
Right, and I don't know if it needs to come from CJ Bailey, but it probably needs to come from his receiver coach or Dave Doran himself. Like, hey, guys are looking up to you, and we can't, if they see you moping around, it's going to make them mope around. You're arguably the best player on our team, and we need you to be a good leader. And it kind of makes me think of what's going down in Miami right now with the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Quarterback situation isn't what they want. But look, you got to go out there, and it could be frustrating, but you can't let it affect the rest of the team, and you need to be more of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. Be solution. And I wonder if those conversations are being had. I can't necessarily blame KC for being upset, but I don't think that's the way that you go about it. Go about it and fix it on the field. Try to do something that helps CJ Bailey out. You know, if you're going to be doing that, hey, are you watching film with him? Are you having conversations with him during the week? Let's not, you know, be pointing fingers here. Let's be part of the solution.
I only have one story that's even kind of related to this, and it wasn't a huge deal, and it wasn't me. I was just in the quarterback room. Someone else had it happen, where our coach brought up the after touchdown for the quarterback, the player at the time, for a touchdown pass, and then for a touchdown run. And after the touchdown pass, jumping in offensive linemen's arms, big fist bumps, and then after the touchdown run where he just handed it off, I mean, it was borderline not even a clap. It was just like, all right, jog to the sideline. And the coach basically said without saying, like, I don't care if you have to fake it. Like, we have to be excited when the offense scores. And whether it's your stat or someone else's stat, you have to score. And I do think it matters. I think it's if you're the touchdown scorer and you're jacked up, and I'm not saying you have to, you know, do the dirty bird and you know, go crazy, but if you're flexing, if you're jumping in your offensive line's arms and everybody's running to the end zone, it does kind of raise the emphasis or the excitement of the team.
Yeah, and it kind of does lead to a bigger question of where the leadership is on this team right now. Last year you had Peyton Wilson, you had Brendan Armstrong go through his struggles, but I think everyone really respected him for the way he handled it and came back. And right now, without being in the locker room or being out of practice, it doesn't really look like there is a clear leader on the team. Maybe it was Grayson McCall now that he's banged up. Who is it? And because of his play, KC has to be a leader. The best players they don't always have to be rah-rah guys, but they got to be either leading by example or you know, if they want to lead with their voice, then do that as well. But having poor body language, I think everyone takes notice of that.
That'll lead us into our next question here. At T to the Rock, who is a frequent contributor to our questions here on Pack Therapy. Maybe the concept of bringing in a bunch of portal guys doesn't work in the short term, especially for a QB. It takes a while to learn a new system and game chemistry with their skill players. I also wonder about the level of commitment for some of these grad transfers who know they won't be back next year regardless. Basically, what what the commenter is asking here is that the lesson learned of this season of you can't just go and kind of microwave an offense and bring in a bunch. You got to preheat the oven and leave it in there for 4 hours.
Is this Dabo's burner account?
We do take transfers. Everyone is transferring from high school.
I think that also kind of goes back to what my last statement was about the leadership. Is when you bring in a bunch of guys, new guys every year, I think it does become harder to create true unity and a team and grow together.
It adds to the question of let's say like somebody should say to, and I'm just picking Concepcion because that's what everyone was talking about. Let's say he's not excited enough on a touchdown. Let's say he's moping around the locker room. Somebody's got to grab him and say, dude, like what the heck? And obviously there would be different words used in a college football locker room, but are you going to let somebody do that that's been on campus for 6 months? Like both captains from the offense were Zeke Correll, incoming transfer, Grayson McCall, incoming transfer. Like that's an interesting deal here where, you know, somebody's going to try to lead and you can hit them with like, buddy, you weren't here 9 months ago.
It is harder for those guys to lead a guy like KC because he was already the big man on campus before they got here. So they kind of probably feel like, well, in a sense, this is his team more than mine. And I think it does create challenges. I still think you would be foolish not to use the transfer portal. But this is probably an example of showing the negative causes it can have on a team is just with new guys coming in, it creates a new dynamic that we haven't seen before. And you also wonder if NIL, you know, everyone's playing for themselves more now than they were in the past. It's just a new era, and I think you need to use the transfer portal. And you look at a team like Miami, obviously it's working well for them. It's probably not working well for some other teams like Florida State.
Which, It's kind of fun to watch that one. At DDogTX, so DDog Texas maybe. 2 questions for, I referenced this earlier, the legendary Mike. Can you give insight into what goes on in the QB prep in the week leading up to a game?
Yeah, I think typically for college football on Monday, we'll go back to Sunday. Sunday you go back and you typically watch the game the day before. Might watch a little with the team, maybe a little completely with the offense, but really you're with your position coach. So CJ Bailey's watching it with Kurt Roper and all the other quarterbacks. Then come Monday, you get a little preview of the upcoming week. So get a little understanding personnel-wise who they are. I would hope CJ is watching some film on himself or of Wake to get a little head start on them.
Monday is traditionally the mandated NCAA off day, which is off is in the most air quotes possible. The NCAA mandates that you have 1 day per week with absolutely no mandatory commitments. It's you're supposed to do schoolwork. Maybe for other positions you get to have an off day. For quarterback, your day doesn't change a ton other than you're not out on the practice field. So you're watching a bunch of film. There's cut-ups already ready for you. But technically that is the off day. So Sunday there's coaches involved. Monday it's mostly just the players watching, but you want to be watching a bunch.
Yeah, and then Tuesday, Wednesday are the big work days in college football. So on Tuesday you're probably watching a lot of first and second down, preparing for the blitzes, but we're not quite getting into the situations yet. And then Wednesday is a big situation day. You focus on third down, you focus on red zone. And then Thursday is more of a feel-good day, kind of go through the all the different first, second, and third down, red zone, hit on it all. But it's more of a fast version walkthrough. I mean, you're not completely walking through, but you're just wearing helmets. And then on Friday, it's a final walkthrough to get ready for the game on Saturday.
The second part of that question is, and actually it's worded kind of maybe a little vaguely, so you can tell me which way I should take this. Secondly, do you believe the talent at wide receiver justifies the disproportionate amount of looks for KC? I read that as, with so many good pass catchers, should they continue forcing the ball to KC? But I guess it could also be, do you think having all these other talented wide receivers is why they aren't getting the ball to KC enough, and is that justifiable?
I would say that is justifiable if you had more than 4 catches for 5 yards. I get that you can't get everyone, 10 catches, but I think in an ideal world, you're getting KC 8 to 10, you're getting Noah Rogers 5 to 6, Justin Jolie 5 to 6, Wesley Grimes mixed in there, and then everyone leaves happy. But
and not every target is created the same. Noah Rogers obviously has some deep ball ability. 5 targets to him and 5 targets to somebody like KC Concepcion, the air yards might be if you get 10 for KC Concepcion out of the slot and 5 for Noah Rogers, the air yards, the ball traveling in the air on those attempts could be similar. Not every target is the same.
The different skill sets are going to be a different way to look at it. I don't expect them to use Noah Rogers on just sweeps like they do KC, where that's a touch, but it's behind the line of scrimmage. So I think at the end of the day, we just have to find a way to get everyone more involved, starting with KC and then kind of going down from there. But Noah Rogers looks good. I mean, he caught that one ball turned up field and a toe touching the sideline away from being a touchdown. So I've been impressed with him, and I think that they got to find a way to just get everyone more involved.
I tried to group a bunch of comments and questions into just a few to kind of give the full idea. So we're going to 2 Matts. We have Matt Sumter 2664 on YouTube, and then we'll read from Matt Fisher, who actually tracked me down in my Twitter DMs. Matt Sumter, first of all, complimented the pod. Thank you very much. Tell your friends. Then said, I would assume that each new week opens the playbook a little wider for CJ. Would you say that the offense's 5.4 average yards per reception and 2.6 average yards per rush is from, then little multiple choice here, my favorite questions in high school. Would you say that all those stats is from continued growing pains for a new quarterback, overly conservative play calling, bad scheme, or some other cause for this mediocrity?
All the above?
Yeah, there's all of the above. Then you get A and B, B and C, none of the above. So that's one way to put it. Matthew Fisher on Twitter. Help me understand this offensive game plan scheme. Why do we insist on trying to establish the run when it's obvious it just ain't happening? Why can't we seem to throw beyond the sticks on third down? He was checking down on third and long, even when he had a clean pocket and time to let it develop. Don't give me the freshman excuse. Less than 200 yards of offense should be a fireable offense, no matter the opponent, much less a team from the MAC. I would say there's two groups, and that's why I tried to reference them when you're looking at the offensive game plan. There's one group that is looking for, like, you could tell they're somebody that's going to draft on analytics. Like, they want the answer. Why isn't this happening? Why is our average? And then there's the other that's just saying, what the heck, we're NC State, that's NIU, that's not enough of an offensive. There's two camps. I don't know if either's right or wrong, but with this much frustration in the offense, with this many questions around the offense, do you have anything you can give to Matt Sumter and Matt Fisher and everyone else commenting?
Well, I think to the NC State fans that are kind of unhappy with the offensive performance and playing conservative with a lead, I get the frustration because I do think where college football differs from the NFL is style points do matter. You know, to get into the college football playoff, you know, beating NIU by 7 and beating them by 21, it's looked at differently. So I get that, but it's also hard to argue against Doran's philosophy that a win's a win. And with the way that the defense was playing, with the way, and honestly, with the fashion, it's like they just had 2 sack fumbles that cost them the game. Our true freshman quarterback right now is looking a little bit confused, and why are we going to put ourselves in a situation where that could be the result? Because the way the defense was playing, it was pretty clear that we were going to win the game if they just didn't give up a big play.
In the radio headset, they were probably saying, like, unless it's wired, take the check down. Unless it's wired, throw it away. It's a punt, a field goal, a PAT at the end of every possession, you know, some kind of kick, and when we win this game.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was communicated, whether it came from the head coach, whether it came from the offensive coordinator or quarterback coach. But, hey, look, you take care of the ball the way our defense is playing, we're going to win this game. So him checking the ball down on third and long, I have no problem with that at all. Sometimes that's the right play. And I think we will see this offense grow and develop under CJ. I mean, you say not to use a true freshman as an excuse. It's a legit reason.
There's a difference between a reason and an excuse. I've made that argument in the past. A reason is legit. An excuse is you're trying to find something to blame, and you're trying to scapegoat.
And we'll see how the opposing teams continue to try to confuse him, and if he's able to pick up on it. But and I think that's where it falls on the coaching staff to find plays that he's comfortable with, find plays that maybe limit the thinking, find ways that the blitz pressure looks don't, you know, necessarily make him hot, or he doesn't have to worry about it as much. So I do think this offense will grow, and I can't necessarily blame Dave for his philosophy and playing conservatively.
To lean into that, and we've gone a little long this week, so we'll wrap it up on this. If you hide the scores and you just look at W's and L's, through the first 5 weeks, it's an understandable schedule, right? It's 3 wins, 2 losses. The 2 losses are to teams in the top 20 in the country. They're teams that going into the season we expected to be extremely talented. And then you know, the wins have come against the teams you're supposed to win. So as long as you figure it out now, like, no harm, no foul, because, you know, a win is a win in Dave Doran's world. It doesn't matter if you lose giving up 59 or you lose giving up, you know, a safety and you lose 2-0. Loss is a loss. So 3-2 going into Wake Forest this weekend, an opportunity for them to really open up the offense. We'll see if they do. Don't forget to leave comments and questions on YouTube, and please subscribe anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends. Until next week, this has been Pack Therapy.